Hello and welcome. If this is your first time here, my name is Raven Burns Kushner. On this channel, I review vampire and paranormal entertainment with an eye towards what we can learn as far as life lessons from these stories. I am an artist and a life coach, so let's dive into it. Today, I want to talk about the top 10 celebrity vampires. Now, I wanted to do a little bit of a departure from what I normally talk about because this is really on my mind. As I've been painting, I've been looking at a lot of references, a lot of different people, and I thought, you know, what makes someone a vampire? What makes someone vampire material? So that gave me the idea to do this list. Before I get into all that, I wanted to give an update on my artwork. I did just complete the last painting that I was working on. It is part of the Dark Gift series that I'm working on. And I had in mind the book, The Vampire Lestat, as I was working on it, because I'm reading that right now. And what I had in mind is when Lestat was first turned into a vampire and he was all alone because Magnus had died and he was getting to know his own powers. And he was really cut off from everything and everyone that he had loved previously. So there was a sadness, but there was also this magnificent hope of what he could do in the future. So I was thinking about those emotions as I was making this painting. So I don't have a title for it yet, but it will be on the website shortly. All right, well, let's get into this list. So as I was going through the list of what I feel makes a worthy vampire, I had 10 things on my list of criteria. Now, this is in no particular order. I have my notes here so that I wouldn't forget anything. But if they had one or several of these characteristics, they made it onto the list. All right. Number one is they appear much younger than their chronological age, right? Number two is they have a seemingly effortless or like a divine intervention almost as far as their career success. Number three is career longevity. So people who started working young and have been working ever since. Number four, of course, is stylish and fabulous. Number five is that they are beautiful and or magnetic in some kind of a way. And I have to admit, I was mainly thinking of the vampire Lestat as a character when I was coming up with this list because he is the quintessential and ultimate vampire, right? Number six is that they have a complicated relationship with religion. Now that's something that Lestat had. He had somewhat of a love-hate, which turned into a hate-hate relationship with religion. So I'll discuss that in some of the members of this list. Number seven is that they are attracted to the dark side and have been from a young age. That's key. Number eight is that they have a sense of the theatrical and or they were attracted to theater from a young age. Number nine is that they are influenced or seemingly influenced by the paranormal. And then number 10 is they would look great in fangs. Okay. All right, well, let's get into it. You know, another interesting thing about this list that wasn't planned but just happened is that almost everyone on this list has their birthday within a few days of the 20th, either like 2 or 3 days before or 2 or 3 days after. That's really interesting. Of whatever month that they were born in, it's right in there, except for the top three. Now, all of the top three, all of them, regardless of their birthday month, have their birthdays in that first week, the first few days of their birthday month. So that's really interesting and weird. All right, let's get started. Number 10, Vera Wang, right? Vera Wang looks so much younger than she is. And not only that, she seems to kind of always be surprised and shocked that people keep referencing her age. She's just like, this is just what I do. You know, she's just awesome. And as far as the seemingly easy success, she's one of these people that just seems to go from glory to glory. I mean, she was the youngest editor of Vogue, and she walked into it basically right out of school. She got her job as the youngest editor of Vogue, and then she went from there. She went on to, after editing magazines, she went on to work for Ralph Lauren, and then she went on to have her own line, of course. She was born actually on June 27th, 1949. She's a Cancer. This is interesting. We have a few Cancers on the list. She was inducted into the Fashion Hall of Fame recently through Biden, President Biden. And it's funny because Biden said that he looked in his wife's closet and all he could see is Vera Wang. Like apparently his wife is a huge Vera Wang fan as well. What really clinched the deal for me are a couple different things. One is that she, in her wedding line, which is what she's known for, she has other businesses, but she's known for her wedding line. She came out in 2012 with a black wedding collection, which I thought, okay, she's on the list, right? And then in 2019, she did it again, where she created an unconventional wedding line. And none of the dresses in that collection are white. So they're all kinds of various colors, anything but white, which is like, that is a badass vampire move. So she is definitely on the list. The final thing that really clinched it was she has a pantry filled with only orange food for no other reason than that she thinks orange food is fabulous. Hello. Number 9, Naomi Campbell. Naomi Campbell was born May 22nd, 1970. So she is a Gemini. She was bullied as a child. And that's another thing that a lot of the people have in common. A lot of them were bullied as kids, which is going to happen to you when you stand out in some way. It's just people going to hate, right? So she was bullied as a child for being ugly, of all things. She was called Olive Oil. She made it onto the list because she is the only person that I know of who has just continued to model. Like, most of them, you know, have to stop in their mid to late 20s because that's just the life cycle of a model. But she's not just modeling like special kind of collections like for old people or something. Like, she's just models. She was recently in an Alexander McQueen fashion show just along with all the other models. She's just amazing. She definitely has unbelievable charm. Like, when you see interviews with her, you can never imagine that she does any of the things that she's accused of, like throwing cell phones at folks and stuff. But she does do that, right? She's got that vampire temper. I do not cross her. And when it flares up, it flares up. And when it's gone and dissipated, she's the most charming, like ridiculously charming person. And her voice is one of those that could lure people to their deaths. So she could definitely pull off being a vampire. Right. All right, awesome. Number 8 is Lenny Kravitz. Now, Lenny Kravitz is just beautiful, and he's just on any list that I would have. He was born May 26, 1964, so he is also another Gemini. He just looks awesome. And what really clinched the deal, though, is not just what he looks like, it's the fact that he is 58 years old and he hasn't been sick in 37 years, right? Hasn't been sick in 37 years. Now, he claims that he exercises and eats a vegan diet. Whatever, I eat a vegan diet too. So what happened to me, right? No, Lenny drinks the blood of the innocent, right? I stand by that. Number 7 is Alexander McQueen. Now, Alexander McQueen, he first caught my eye just because of what he makes. Like, he makes clothes that look like they belong on vampires, and that's why I love his stuff. He was born March 17th, 1969, so he's a Pisces. Now, he unfortunately walked into the sun, so to speak, so we didn't get to see, you know, what he would have done later on. So the career longevity would have been there, but we can't really speak to that because, you know, he took himself out of this world. But he was one of those that never wavered. It's not like he found himself later in life. Like, he knew from the get-go what he was going to do, and he bet on himself, and he just did it. He quit school at 16 and decided he wanted to take tailoring classes because he knew he wanted to work in that. So that was a bold move because his family was not wealthy, right? So just to say, well, I'm just going to be a fashion designer is like, you know, he had to really believe in himself, and he did. He took his tailoring courses, got internships right away in some of the best places to get an internship, and then just sort of seamlessly strolled into that and started his own label. At one point, he did approach Central St. Martin's, which is, if not it is definitely one of the top fashion design schools in the world, right? He approached them not to take classes, but to teach when he was 21 years old, because he felt that he was that badass. They loved him, they liked him, but they like, you aren't old enough to teach here, but they did let him take classes there, so he ended up getting his MFA. So that kind of incredible boldness and self-confidence put him on the list, aside from his vampire fashions, but also the fact that he has this prankster, or had this prankster kind of personality. Supposedly he sewed some obscenities into the clothing of some clothes that were made for Prince Charles. So that's a pretty risky thing to do, but he did it because he wanted to do it. And it kind of reminded me of when Lestat, in the Interview with the Vampire series, scratched the X's on the X on the face of the mayor just because he was pissed, and he just knew he could get away with it. Stopped time, he just scratched the X in his face, went on about his business because he could. Right. All right. Number 6 is Cassandra Peterson, aka Elvira. Of course, she's on the list, right? For many reasons. A, just because of her body of work. She is and has always been interested in horror. She is also a huge fan of AMC's show. So there was an after show with her on it, and she talked about how much she loved the show. She's another one that just seemed to sort of walk glory to glory as far as her career. But before I get into that, she was born September 17th, 1951. So she is a Virgo. At the age of 71, she is still dating. She recently came out, so congratulations to her. She's really happy with her girlfriend and really happy that she doesn't have to hide any longer. But as far as her career, she just sort of, knew what she wanted to do as well and just went into it. I mean, after she graduated from high school, she knew she wanted to perform. She had fallen in love with horror at the age of 8 after watching House on Haunted Hill. She wanted to work in Vegas for whatever reason. She saw an Elvis movie and just fell in love with that whole world. She went to Vegas right after she graduated. She somehow talked her parents into going there as a trip. So they went ahead and did that for her. She ended up meeting somebody. They hired her, worked in Vegas, actually met Elvis, right? Fluke of flukes. A friend of a friend was having some sort of party. She shows up at the party and Elvis is there. Elvis talks to her and says, you got to get out of Vegas. This is like a dead end. If you want to make a real career, you got to get out of here. And so she took his advice, and which she probably wouldn't have taken anyone else's advice, she said, but coming from Elvis, her idol, she took the advice, and she is who she is today. All right, number 5 is David DASTMALCHIAN. Now, I did not know who he was prior to the after show from AMC's Interview with the Vampire. They had sort of a celebrity fan show, and he was one of the fans along with Cassandra Peterson. So he was on the show. And what stuck out to me about him is he showed up dressed as a vampire. Or vampire chic, as I like to say. Black eyeliner, black, nail polish, all black clothes, hot as hell. And it's funny because one of the other guests was like, I think David is the only one who actually is a real vampire. And what I loved about his answers, he neither confirmed nor denied that, nor did he laugh. He's like, he didn't say yes or no, but he's like, I think that possibility excites you. Hello. That's a vampire answer if ever I heard one. So started loving him right off the bat. So he was born July 21st, 1975. So he is another Cancer on the list. He unfortunately did have a bout with heroin. And that is something that some of the other ones do have in common as well, like NAOMI and the others that I have on this list had some sort of a bout with chemical substances, which isn't that unusual. Our world is so sad. It's almost like, why isn't everyone on drugs? Because the stuff that we have to deal with as humans is pretty heavy. So anyway, he did have that happened to him. He was also bullied as a child. He has vitiligo, and so he has spots, he called them, on his body from the lack of pigmentation. And as a child, they called him polka dot and stuff like that. But what's really cool is one of his roles, he got a role in Suicide Squad, and he was a character whose spots were his superpower. How cool is that? Like, how divinely inspired is that? Like, that is so awesome. And of course, he starred in The Dark Knight, which was filming in Chicago, which is where he was when he was at his low point. So just an awesome person. Awesome because of basically what his life became. You know, started off, you know, he could have definitely ended up a statistic, but he ends up being a modern day vampire. And I know that he recently wrote a comic book series, so that's really cool too. So check that out. Number 4 is Sam Reed. Of course, Sam Reed. Now, you may wonder why he's not higher on the list, and I think when you hear the other names, you'll understand. But Sam Reed was born February 19th, 1987. He is a Pisces. He doesn't look like in real life, the person you would say, oh, he's a vampire. You know, he's pretty clean cut. His favorite designer is Burberry, which is a lot more, you know, conservative clothes, whatever. But he wanted to be a vampire his whole life. So he says that being Lestat is living out a childhood dream. He dressed as a vampire every year for Halloween. He had fangs before the show of his own, right? So he's definitely destined to play Lestat, not just because of how he looks, which of course he's perfect, but because this is something that was in his soul and in his consciousness. And as far as going from glory to glory in his career, he definitely has that quality as well. He's one of these actors that started working right away. Like, he went to London to go to acting school, and he started working in a movie right out of graduation, like worked on a movie called Anonymous. And I looked at his IMDb, and he's been working every year ever since. So that's unusual. Of course, he has the chops for it. He's talented. He's beautiful. So of course, that is his path, but he's awesome and definitely would make a wonderful vampire in real life. Number 3 is Nicolas Cage. Now, Nicolas Cage might actually be a vampire, okay? He was born, and also his nickname was Nicky. Hello. If you're familiar with the books, you understand why that's funny. He was born January 7th, 1964. He is a Capricorn. He was also bullied as a young kid on the school bus, and how he handled his bullying is amazing. So he was known as Nicky Coppola at the time because he is the nephew of Francis Ford Coppola, the director. He was bullied, and so the way he took care of it is he put on some motorcycle boots and a black leather jacket and showed up at school with dark sunglasses, pretending to be his own cousin. And he basically threatened all the kids that were bullying him and said, if I hear of any of you threatening my cousin, I'm going to kick your ass, right? And they believed him. Apparently the bullying stopped. I've never heard of anything like that. That is definitely something that a vampire would do. But what clinches the deal for Nicolas Cage is he fell in love with New Orleans, just like Anne Rice, right? So ever since he went there, he has done projects close to there, and he owns property there. One of which is he bought the Lalaurie mansion previously owned by serial killer Madame Delphine Lalaurie. Yes, he doesn't own it anymore, but he did own it. And he does own a cemetery where the infamous voodoo queen Marie Laveau rests now. If that weren't enough, there was an actual rumor about him being a vampire because some old photo surfaced from the 19th century looking exactly like Nicolas Cage. So there was a rumor floating around that he actually is a vampire. And I agree. He claims that he looked in the mirror afterwards to see if he saw a reflection. So he confirmed that he's not a vampire. But we all know that that's some BS because those are just rumors. Lestat and we both have reflections, right? All of this stuff about crosses and holy water and no reflections is nonsense, right? Nicolas Cage is a vampire. All right, number 2. We're getting close to number 1. Number 2 is Marilyn Manson. Now, I went back and forth about him being number 1 because he would not have to make any adjustments if he were turned into a vampire. He basically was born to be a vampire. He has a complicated relationship with religion. He went to religious schools as a child, but he was one of these kids that asked a lot of questions. He, wasn't getting the answers that satisfied him. And he basically rejected the whole thing. And he considers himself an atheist now. His birthday is January 5th, 1969. So he is also a Capricorn, like Nick Cage. So in his life as a Christian, in a Christian school, he was also bullied. And that's another thing that messed with his faith is like, he's like, here I am in this Christian school and I'm getting my ass kicked every day. He was bullied mercilessly, right? He ended up getting kicked out of the Christian school for putting a dildo in the teacher's desk. Definitely a vampire thing to do. He ended up getting transferred as a teen to this other school, a regular school. And he tells the story in Celebrity Ghost Stories, which I used to watch religiously. And I remember his episode where he talked about getting involved with the paranormal by accident. So if I can, I'm going to try to put a clip of that because at the end, he calls himself a monster. And that's long before any of the accusations that are out there about him now. So I think that's interesting. And although he says he's an atheist, he does seem to have a little bit of a belief in the danger of the paranormal, which I think is really interesting. And he admits to dabbling in all that kind of stuff. And I don't know if that had an effect on him or not. It's really impossible to say. But in any case, he would be absolutely perfect as a vampire, and he may actually also already be a vampire. Okay.
It just didn't exist. It was gone. And no one has an explanation for it. The fact that it disappeared, like it was some sort of evil oasis in the middle of the night, I think was directly related to our behavior. And that was the most supernatural, strange thing that I've ever in my life experienced. I've myself have underestimated the power of the occult to this day. I would go back to Ohio right now and look for it, but I know that it won't be there. I think that I've turned into a worse monster than anything that I could have dreamed of because that became my life. And I don't think that there's any other explanation for it.
Number 1, finally, is somebody who I really did not follow. Obviously, I know who he is. He was never really on my radar. But as I started researching him, I'm like, of course, why have I not been following this man? Alice Cooper is number 1. Alice Cooper is definitely one of those in his career that went from glory to glory to glory. He was born February 4th, 1948. Shows no sign of slowing down, still tours. He started a band called Hollywood Vampires. So if that alone wasn't enough, then I don't know what else to say. He definitely went from glory to glory. He started a band in high school called the Earwigs, where he fell in love with the Beatles and their success when he saw them perform. And before that, he was a cross-country track star. So that's why he didn't get bullied. He was a track star and a rock star in high school, right? So he had no problems. He eventually moved to Phoenix with his family because he had asthma and they felt like the drier climate would be better for him. Started a band there with his friends. Started playing in clubs. Like he just never had a problem. Like he just seemed to just go from gig to gig. And watching him in interviews, he's just one of these people that just is. Like he's not nervous. He doesn't get upset. He's just he's just amazing. So he definitely incorporated horror, obviously, and theatricality in his show from the very beginning. Even in high school, they had a guillotine that they used in their performance in high school. He was able to do this. And obviously now he has his own touring, and he has the Hollywood Vampires. So he's definitely one of these people that could have been a vampire for sure. What's interesting though about him is almost like he evolved into whatever the next level of evolution of vampire would be. Like, that's why he ended up being #1, because he just has his life together. He's been married for over 40 years. He was an alcoholic, but never had a problem. Like, he was always a functioning alcoholic. Now, he did end up getting sober. He went to rehab twice, and the second time it stuck. And he just sort of knew. He said he had just an overwhelming feeling inside that he would never again struggle with alcohol, and he never has, right? And what really also clinched it is that he ended up giving advice to Marilyn Manson. And Marilyn Manson was married to Dita Von Teese for a little bit. And he was actually really upset when the relationship broke up because he didn't want to get a divorce. And so he approached Alice Cooper, because Alice Cooper has been married for 40 years. And they had just a real conversation about it, relationships and stuff like that. So it's almost like he's like the grandfather of them all. Like, he is the leader, and he's a Christian now. He says, devout Christian. He still does all of his stunts, but it's almost like to him, it's just like, this is just what he does, And I just think that he is at that top level. Like, it's almost like he has transcended all of the antics, and to him, it's all just a lot of fun, and he just enjoys it. So I definitely think that he's #1. All right, so that's my list. Let me know if there's anybody that I left out. I'm sure there's a bunch of honorable mentions in my head, like David Bowie, for example, and others. So if there's somebody else you think should have been on the list, let me know in the comments. Till next time, love yourself and love yourself well. See you then. Bye-bye.